Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down an absolutely wild Friday where the Supreme Court told the president his tariffs were illegal, which could have triggered a $175 billion refund. But, the story didn't stop there, so let's just dive right in. $175 billion. Just think about that number for a second. On Friday, February 20th, that's kind of the bill that landed on the U.S. government's doorstep. But here's the crazy part. It wasn't for something they bought. Nope. This was all the tariff money they'd already collected from thousands and thousands of businesses, and suddenly, they might have to give every single cent back.
So that one question, do we have to pay it all back, is what kicked off a whole day of just chaos. We're talking legal drama, economic whiplash, the whole shebang. It was a full-on showdown between the president and the Supreme Court, and it all came down to one thing. Who really has the power to tax stuff coming into the country?
Okay, so how did we even get here? Well, it all started with this huge, landmark decision from the Supreme Court. And this thing, it took direct aim at one of the president's absolute signature economic policies. So picture this. It's 10:03 in the morning and bam, the news hits. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 vote, just declared a massive chunk of President Trump's tariffs illegal. The majority opinion, penned by Chief Justice John Roberts himself, was basically a slap on the wrist. It said, look, the president used a law that just, it didn't give him the power to do what he did. Period. And the whole thing hinged on this one single law. It's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so we'll just call it IEPA. Now, this law was designed for, extraordinary threats. But here's the kicker, the really crucial part. No president ever before this administration had tried to use it to slap tariffs on things. So the administration's argument was basically, hey, the law says we can regulate importation, and that's broad enough to let us set tariffs. But the Supreme Court, they were like, no way. They disagreed, and they disagreed forcefully. They called that interpretation a transformative expansion of presidential power. The majority literally wrote that for powers this big, the president needs clear congressional authorization, and then they just laid it out. He cannot point to any.
Okay, so you see the legal drama, right? But that immediately created this massive financial problem. Because think about it, if the tariffs were illegal from the start, what happens to all that cash that's already been collected? Right away, the folks over at the Penn-Wharton budget model did the math, and they came up with that huge number. Over $175 billion could be owed in refunds. We're talking about thousands of companies that paid these duties. But the court's ruling, it was totally silent on how this would even work. It didn't say how or even if the money should be returned. So just a huge cloud of uncertainty hanging over everything.
And, this wasn't just an outside concern. It was a worry right there inside the court. Justice Kavanaugh, writing in his dissent, straight up said the refund process would probably be a mess. And he's got a point. It brings up all these really tricky questions, like what do you do if businesses already pass those costs down the line to their customers? The immediate impact on trade policy was just stark. I mean, think about this. According to one economist, these now illegal tariffs, they made up something like 60% of all the tariffs being collected. So with the stroke of a pen, the Supreme Court basically cut the average U.S. tariff rate almost in half. It just dropped from about 9.5% all the way down to 5%. Overnight.
So you'd think that'd be the end of it, right? Nope, the White House did not take this ruling lying down. The president's response was, it was swift, it was defiant, and it basically opened up a whole new chapter in this entire trade showdown. I mean, look how fast this all happened. The ruling drops in the morning. By just after lunch, the president is on Truth Social announcing a brand new 10% global tariff. And then later that afternoon, he's at a press conference, just railing against the decision, calling it deeply disappointing and even an embarrassment. Yeah, the president made his position crystal clear. He was absolutely adamant that he was going to find other ways to impose tariffs, whether Congress explicitly approved or not. He was basically asserting this really broad authority over the whole of trade policy. All right, so we've got the legal smackdown from the court. We've got the defiant response from the White House. So what happens now? Well, the administration, they pivoted fast. They went to a completely different strategy. So they switched their whole legal game plan. They moved to a different law, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. But, and this is important, there's some really key differences here. For one, any tariffs under this law can only last 150 days unless Congress signs off. And instead of having all these different rates for different countries, this one's just a flat 10% on everything, all global imports.
So, for all the businesses out there, for the whole economy, the goal was made pretty clear by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The plan was to use whatever other laws they could find to basically replace the tariffs the court just threw out. The explicit goal? Keep the money coming in, keep the total tariff revenue virtually unchanged. So the legal paperwork changed, but the economic policy, that stayed exactly the same.
And all of this whole whirlwind of a day, it leaves us with this one giant question. When a president's power gets checked by the courts, but then they immediately find another way to get the exact same result, who actually feels that economic shockwave? Is it the importers who now have a whole new set of rules to deal with? Is it us, the consumers? Or is it the entire global economy? It's this massive, high-stakes clash of law, power, and money. And believe me, it is far from over.